Evan, you too.
Yeah.
All right. Once again, welcome to an unexpected podcast with our extremely professional opening riff, which mainly entails us coordinating the various people who are going to record recording. But hi, I'm Matt. I'm in Boston. Joining me is Evan, also still in Boston. Alisher, who is in Pennsylvania, and Trey Haupt. Did I pronounce your name right, Trey?
Close enough. It's hopped. Same thing.
Haupt. Trey Haupt in you're in Dallas, right? Or are
Yes,
you
sir.
yeah, in the Dallas area. Okay. And uh this is kind of a post Nova recap episode. Trey is joining us because he came in third at that tournament, and was nice enough to join us and spend a little time with us. We're going to be talking through a variety of stuff related today. One of the things we're going to be talking about is kind of how our predictions from the last couple of episodes, where we were musing about what the strong armies were from the last edition, played out at Nova, and what we saw, because Nova was, for Evan and I, really the first large tournament of the new edition, the fully formed new edition that we went to with the armies of Middle Earth and legions involved. So we're gonna talk through that because I think that those things we predicted those things would change the meta, and they have in fact changed the meta, not entirely in the ways we predicted, and we'll talk a little bit about how things diverged from that and other things like the veto system and playing doubles, and how that all spun out. So, Alisher, what do you want to talk about first?
Yeah, let's quickly talk about the double. So we're not gonna spend too much time talking about this because, well, it's doubles, but all of us played in the doubles and not all of us played in the GT. So I'm gonna quickly try to see if I can perhaps pull up the lists, but I just started off. So um we Matt and Evan played on a team. Trey, you played presumably with someone else from Texas.
Yep.
And then I played with Caleb Silverglide. Um,
Trey,
what did you?
why don't you,
Yeah,
before we go on, why don't you give the somebody else from Texas a name so he gets proper recognition here?
I mean, obviously, it was Michael Tremaine. Great guy. Came up with me. We flew out together, stayed together, and we brought a funky, like almost all cav white hand for the doubles, which was fun.
All Cav Army of the White Hand. That is the first time I've heard of such a beast. All right, well, we'll go on. Sorry, Alisher. Sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure
no,
we.
no, no, that's fair because I literally was just bulldozing ahead. So that's good to know. You guys were. Did you play Saruman or no?
I did play Saruman. I had
Okay,
no idea what his spells were going into it because I've never even used his profile before, so we had fun.
fair enough. I'm gonna quickly just. We're not gonna get into them, but I'm just gonna very quickly read off what the top five lists were. Um, Round five was Alex Orzak and whoever his partner was, another Texas player playing Shadows of Angmar. In fourth place, again, I don't know who the teammate was, but I see that it's Sam McHenry. I want to say, oh, I do know Josh Grimmer was his teammate because they're somewhat local there in Maryland. They play Breaking of the Fellowship, which is a great list. In third place was Caleb and myself. We were playing Army of the White Hand. In second place was Ben and Sam Gallagher. They were playing Men of the West. Basically, honestly, an interesting way of playing Men of the West because you can't play Eagles in doubles because there aren't two
Hmm.
heroes. So they essentially took Aragorn and then in one side with just a couple guys, and then Gwahir and two Eagles. So interesting roundabout way of playing
That
Eagles.
was a very common build I
It
noticed
was.
in
I
those
was
tournaments.
surprised. Do the Eagles get
The
like
main
eight,
well, the main
nine, or do
reasoning
they get
behind
plus
that,
one?
no, they don't get anything. The main reasoning is just because you get your sort of static army because the double scenarios are specifically designed in a way that forces your primary army to be stuck in the middle generally in like three or four of them. And then the other one deploys the other army just out on the side somewhere. A lot of people went in with the philosophy of because they know which force is their primary, because Aragorn has to be the leader, it's forced. They can put Aragorn in the middle, and then they can just take the eagles and fly them to the middle in like 1, 2 turns. And then basically your entire army is together and the opponent's army isn't, is the philosophy. And it worked out for them.
It definitely did. They did great. And then in first place was Matt and Evan with Men of the West, with Gandalf the White and Aragorn. We're gonna end up be talking about this list a lot, so I don't know that we need to get too far into detail of the list specifically. White Hand is White Hand. Outside of that Men of the West variation that Sam and Ben played, all of the lists are pretty straightforward in terms of their construction. I want to just to recap. Do you remember, Matt, the three scenarios we played for doubles?
So, um, I know one of them was, hang on a second. Let me find, do I have the book handy? I don't have the book handy.
Second one was the Contest of Champions one.
I remember that. I
Right.
have the book on my phone.
The
Let me
the
grab it.
third
Yeah.
one was the one, was it cornered?
Yeah, I
Where
think
you've
it's
got one
cornered
army in the
where
middle
in the
on
middle
on
defending
a
a terrain
terrain
piece.
piece.
Yeah.
Um,
What was the first
The
one?
first one was
Total
almost the domination
Conquest.
one,
I think it's Total Conquest.
something like
You
that.
both
It's the
deploy
domination
six.
one.
Yeah, it's Total Conquest. And then Cornered, and we said dual, not dual
oh yeah, the
heroics. We
Maelstrom
said
one.
Clash of
That's right.
Champions. So it was the Maelstrom one first. That's like Hold Ground, which was Total Conquest. Clash of Champions was second, and Cornered was third.
Yep. That's
Um, quick. Doubles is always interesting just because the scenarios are so strange. It's rarely once in a random blue moon that I play doubles. I think before that Nova doubles, Articon doubles with you, Matt, was the last time I played. So that would have been 2 years ago in the last edition. So
yep.
always a very interesting experience. What did you guys think? What do you guys think of the double scenarios overall, Matt and Evan? You guys play doubles a little bit, well, definitely more than I do, which is just
So,
like you do it consistently at Nova, and I don't do it consistently at Nova.
yeah. I actually really like the double scenarios because of the way they're constructed, and Evan touched on this. They're constructed generally in a way where half your army starts in the middle of the board and the other half is kind of marching to join the other half of the army. And because half of both sides' armies are basically start in a fight in different configurations in the middle of the board, and the other halves are kind of marching to the center. And one of the things it does is it takes so much of the weight off of shooting in those scenarios and puts it on maneuver because there are really very few scenarios. I think there's only one scenario, basically the Contest of Champions type one, where the army kind of starts together in what you might think is a classic battle formation. And the rest of the time, if you have like a whole bunch of your army kind of standing around shooting, you end up losing because you need to be taking that time instead of like standing still and shooting or half moving and shooting. You need to be taking that time to get your figures to where they're actually going to matter in the critical battle. And if you don't do that, you lose. So there tends to be a lot more kind of strategic thought and fighting in all of these scenarios than there is in the single scenarios, and a lot less time spent kiting people and shooting at them, which is kind of a less fun aspect of the game. So I'm a big fan of the scenarios, if only for that reason.
I
Fair
think
enough.
I think it's a similar thought for me. I think they're pretty much the same as the old edition, just with some redesigned points levels, or redesigned VP levels rather. Um, the only minor issue I have now is because the entire game is Legendary Legions and there's a lot of forced leaders. It makes planning for it a little bit boring in the sense of one build generally tends to be more prevalent, which is You put all of the static fighty stuff in with your primary leader because the leader's forced oftentimes in the legions. And then you put all the maneuverable stuff in the secondary army. Um, and that's a little annoying because it forces some structures. I think if it were similar to last edition, where it was in most armies just random which force was the primary and which force was the secondary, I'd like it a little bit more. But even then, I thought it was pretty balanced. And I mean, Dad and our list construction wasn't made based on putting all the static stuff with one hero and all the maneuverable stuff with another hero. And it worked out fine for us. So,
Yeah, we didn't even think about that Eagle build till we got there, and everybody else who took Men of the West took the Eagle build with Aragorn on foot with some guys and three Eagles, and we were looking around going, why didn't we think of that?
yeah.
Um,
Well, I don't know about you, Dad, but I didn't even read the scenarios before we went to the tournament.
all
So
right, use whatever excuse you want to.
Fair enough. I
I'm
like
sorry I didn't plan sufficiently for you.
Go ahead, Trey. What were you going to say?
I will say I like the setup of the splitting up of the forces of the scenarios in the new ones, but honestly, I don't like the way the VPs are set up. Other than the duel of wits scenario, I just feel like the other ones are all kind of clunky. But for doubles where you're having fun, I think it's still fun. Like Michael and I, we went and just have more fun rather than try to win. Um, it's very fun. I don't think they're perfectly balanced for a full-on competitive landscape in doubles. I would say the only fix you could do is have each force be from different legions, I guess, and just have them essentially have the old impossible allies bonus where they can't benefit from each other's stand fast or heroic actions, and that would provide something unique while still having like a very open way to build doubles lists.
So, what did you think was wonky about the points distribution in the scenarios? I'm
I mean, a
curious.
lot of them, the one where it's cornered. That one is just odd because it's like some lists are very defensive KG lists already. So in that scenario, we had it really easily because we just had to keep Saruman alive. And so it's like that's super easy because he's never even going to see combat. And then, I mean, honestly, that was fine altogether. The banners, I mean, the classic GW thing, they just threw banner VPs into almost all of them, which again is fine. Um, I just don't like the way they're set up as much. Although I don't really care for a lot of the way the new scenarios have been set up. I still think it's better than the last edition with having more distribution, more open chances to have varying ways to win and stuff. Major victories generally are more harder. Obviously, we'll probably get into that with this event, what happened with the major and minor wins. Um, but personally, the double scenarios, I think they're fun, but not quite to the competitive standard for like a full-out competitive event, which is why I think events like Articon in the past have always mixed in the normal match play guide with the double scenarios.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I think I remember Articon using the double scenarios out of the book, but maybe I'm wrong about that. But I mean, there are a lot of banner VPs proportionally in the double scenarios. There are, I
It's like
think we
four,
we did
six.
we did the math. I think there were like 16 doubles VP or 16 banner VPs in the double scenarios.
To emphasize this point, in our 24 model Aragorn Gandalf army with a 6-inch banner baked into Aragorn, we decided to drop two models and drop two warriors of Minas Tirith down to the vastly inferior warriors of Rohan in order to put a banner in our list. Um, which, if the banner VPs were A, either not there, or B, much less prevalent, we would not have done.
Yep. And I think we needed to do that too. I don't think that ended up being the wrong choice. But
I
I
mean, you
think
won, so it
we,
can't really be the wrong choice.
yeah. Either or, I think. I don't know if it would have made a huge impact, but it ended up working out for us.
yep. Um, but other than that, I mean, I think I don't know. I'm always interested by the double scenarios, and I think there are a few double scenarios in there, like the Duel of Wits um, scenario and the cornered scenario that create kind of tactical situations that until you actually play these double scenarios a few times, you don't quite realize. Like I don't think that the team we played against in the cornered scenario quite realize the implications of how the point spreads works, because that for folks who aren't familiar with this scenario, that's the one where basically one half of one team's warband starts in the middle, kind of like under siege by the rest of the army that kind of surrounds it, and which and then somebody's kind of marching to their relief, which is a huge disadvantage because one side can kind of apply their entire army for against like half the opponent's army for like a turn or two. But the flip side of that is that that leader that starts in the center under siege is worth like 10 points.
Yeah.
Because the team who's under siege gets 5 points for like keeping him alive and untouched, and the team that's attacking gets 5 points for killing him. But no points for keeping their own leader alive and untouched. And kind of until you realize that most of that scenario is about killing that guy. And if you create a situation where that guy can kind of get out, and you can't pin him down, you have problems with the scenario. And there's a lot of different kind of
Though,
unique
as a
wrinkles
counterpoint,
built into
and what
that.
I think makes the scenario so good is that if you do that and you just run your army away, you will lose because I do believe the central terrain piece gives you
Is
6.
is worth well no it's I think it's
Um,
only 3.
no, 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 no. I
Is it?
think I
Oh,
think it's
maybe
more as
it's
3 and then double as 6. This would be
double as
really
6. Could
useful
be.
if one of us had the
Had the
match
book.
play guide, which I
Yeah.
do not
Sorry,
have
which one are
one.
you looking at?
Cornered.
Cornered.
The center is worth between 3 and 6.
Between 3 and 6. All right, yeah. So that's a fair point. Yeah, you can't abandon the center, but you can at least get your leader out, or at least get your leader into a protected position. It also helps, by the way, if your leader's Aragorn and really tough to kill in the first
Really does.
first instance.
There was never a moment where we were ever concerned about losing any of those 5 points,
Right,
which was nice.
right. But yeah, so doubles are a fun time. Anything else we should talk about in doubles?
Don't
Do we
think
want?
so.
Okay, so the GT, the singles competition. This was a 700-point tourney, and I think it's probably worth starting going through just the top 10 and what the lists were. So, actually, what we should probably do is go back and talk about our predictions from last time about what the strong lists were. And I think our prediction of the strongest list from evil was Army of the White Hand, and the strongest list from good was the Shire. And all right, so with that in mind, why don't we talk through what the results were, and then we can all talk about, why we were wrong and what our excuses were.
We weren't
Yeah,
entirely
fair enough.
wrong, to be fair.
Just kind of for slight background, so 84 people played in Nova. It was 5 rounds this year. It was the altered or revamped version of Veto, which means that instead of with 3 scenarios per pool, there are now 4, of course. Both players will each veto one, and then the scenario that is played will be determined by a 50-50 roll-off. Just so that everybody um knows, let me quickly remind myself what we did. We played pools 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. The scenario that was not the pool that was not chosen was the maneuvering pool. I don't recall necessarily the order of rounds. I'm sure we'll probably inadvertently talk about the ordering in just a moment. Just so everybody who's listening knows, neither Evan nor I played in the tournament. Both of us were judges, so probably a lot of what we're going to have to say is kind of complementary to what Trey and Matt have to say as active participants in Nova. Let me quickly just run down. Again, we'll probably ultimately talk about some of these lists in greater detail as we have a conversation, but for the sake of time and efficiency, I'm going to read the top 10. If something's really weird about the list, I'll make mention of it. But for the most part, these are pretty straightforward. So in 10th place was Josh Ritz, um, from Florida. He played Beornings. He did 4 wins, 1 loss. All of his wins were major, but his loss was a major loss as well. In ninth place was Chris Wemple, who was playing Rivendell. Um, Pretty straightforward composition for Rivendell. It was Elrond, Arwen, and Lindir. No Bilbo that I can see. In eighth place was Sam Gallagher. He was playing Birders Horde, which actually, congratulations, Sam. That's a really, really good tournament finish for a list that I don't think too many people, Sam included, take remarkably seriously. In seventh place was Frank Castillo. He was playing Battle of Fornos. I think, interestingly, his build I like quite a bit. He had obviously the 2 heroes you have to have. He also took Círdan and a Dunedain Ranger. I think he maxed out the Dunedain Ranger's warband of hobbits, so he was able to get mid 30s. In sixth place was Ted Cantu. He was playing Fields of Celebrant. Fifth place was Julian Misu or Michu. He was playing Army of the White Hand, but Army of the White Hand without Saruman, most notably, and with 14 Crebain. I feel like every time we talk about like a Crebain list doing well at a big tournament, it always accompanies a larger number of Crebain than the last tournament we talked about. But in any case, in fourth place, now all of these players moving forward are undefeated, but Adam Fearless, he went 4 wins and a draw. He was playing the Shire. Third, Trey, who's with us here, he also was undefeated, 4 wins, a draw. He was playing Battle of the Five Armies. He'll, of course, talk about his list, but just so people know, it was a Lake Town. So what? It was Lake Town with Tariel, Gandalf, Hilda, and Gwahir. Were those the heroes?
Right. Yep.
Okay. Connor Fenton got second. Now he was undefeated and won all 5 of his games. He was playing Men of the West. Pretty standard version of Men of the West. I think Gandalf, Legolas. Yeah, Gandalf, Legolas, Captain, and Minas Tirith.
Aragorn?
Was
Did
Aragorn in
Oh,
there?
sorry. I meant Aragorn. I said Gandalf, but I meant Aragorn.
Aragorn lists Men
It
of
would
the
have been
West.
a
Now that's
really
special.
No. Yeah, Aragorn, Legolas, and Captain. I think most notably, he did not fall for the trap of Gimli. And in first place, our very own Matthew Iverson, also undefeated, who took Men of the West, but with Aragorn and Gandalf. Is it the exact same? Like, did you have to jumble it at all between doubles and the GT, or no?
It's slightly different.
Okay.
We didn't have the banner. We didn't have the banner. It was just all Warriors of Minas Tirith. It was a shameless copy of Robin's list from Arnicon, figure for figure, line for line. Yeah, shameless
Okay,
copy.
I didn't realize it was an exact copy.
So
That's great.
I guess notably absent from this top 10 is Army of the White Hand with Saruman, the classic build.
I think
Saruman, Green Man, guys.
only one person played it, even, which is very surprising to me.
Yeah, that's what I was curious about, because I didn't see it on the tables. I didn't encounter it, and I was curious if you guys as judges had seen other examples of it.
One true Army of the White Hand. Obviously, Julian's is a
yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Julian, your army's fake. Get out of here. We don't want you.
It is definitely
where was
a
the
weird
White
mutation.
Hand? It's Army of the White Hand without the White Hand.
Yeah. We don't need Saruman. We just need more birds. Yeah. All right. So we'll talk about. So why don't we talk about these 10 armies at least? Briefly. We're not going to go through them figure by figure, but let's start out with the Bjornings. Did anybody see this played or play against it? I did not.
I did not.
I saw it played throughout. Sorry,
I saw his last game. That was it.
Yes. The benefit of judging is we did, in fact, see this army played.
We saw every army
it
played.
seems correct. And it seems to function in a similar way that it did last edition, which is that it beats up the opposing army. They can't kill the bears, and it wins. Its only loss was against Assault on Lothlorien, which isn't overly surprising because Assault on Lothlorien is known to mince the bears, even in last edition. But yeah, it's a good army. I think it's definitely, and this will be a theme here, an army that benefits from the veto system, because it has quite a few difficult matchups, that it can then veto out and make significantly easier.
Gotcha. Yep. I mean, I know you and I played this list a grand total of one. I mean, I assume it's like the old Bjornings where there's really only one way to build it, where you get two bears and then as many other guys as you can fit into it.
There's no options.
Yeah. And I think we played against it once, and I think it fell prey to actually an Umbar army.
Well,
Um,
we played it in doubles, didn't we, last year?
no, no, no. Well, yeah, last year. I'm talking about in new edition,
Yeah.
um, where it fell prey to Umbar in one of the objective based scenarios where a bunch of sneaky guys with stock unseen were running around the board shooting at people and killing everybody but the bears. And I think also I think I had taken I actually took the Knight of Umbar, who the bears were like, huh, maybe we don't want to fight this guy who can be just like us.
I seem to also remember a massive green dragon inn that neither of my bears could enter.
Could fit in. I thought we had allowed them to go in there, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
But
Uh,
Nice.
I thought because
I
I put the
struggle to
Knight of
see how they
Umbar
would
in
have
there.
fit anyways.
Um, but anyway, yeah. So I mean, the Bears, I guess, still have the same problems they used to, but all the same strengths that they used to. Um, all right. So what
I
was
mean,
next,
they
Alisher?
barely changed, didn't they? They got this weird -1 rule, and their banners are 3 inches now. But I think other than that, they're almost exactly the same.
Yeah. What's the weird -1 rule? I can't recall.
It's something like for each bear that's on the battlefield, you roll a die, and on a 6, they have like Harbinger of Evil or something.
Hmm. Okay.
It's very weird. Oh,
It's
but it's
something
Harbinger
super
of
easy,
Evil,
but
but
don't be
only
rude.
for terror tests. Um,
All right. Well, I'll have to look that one up. I'll let me grab the book. I'll look it up while you're doing that. Talk about the next one, Alisher, or
The
while I'm doing
next
that.
one. So, just kind of in general, I mean, our analysis ahead of this tournament, I want to say was pretty spot on. The lists that stand outside of what we thought were going to do well. Um, I mean, an argument can be said that we didn't necessarily predict that the variation of Men of the West that Matt ran would win. But Men of the West, we said, would likely do very well. That one was a list we said was great. We also said Hobbits would do well. I don't know that we had set put Battle of the Five Armies in our like top. I think we did like a top three good, top three evil. I don't think that was in our top. Hobbits obviously were White Hand, although this is kind of feels a little bit weird to say this version of White Hand. White Hand is, I feel like I have to keep saying that, but like White Hand, obviously we all know is very good. Fields of Celebrant was very surprising, but I guess let me start back from the bottom. So obviously none of us had necessarily keyed in on Bears. And I think to Evan's point earlier, what played out, how it played out is what makes sense. They have certain really rough counters, but then otherwise, if you don't have an answer for the Bears, you're in poor shape. Rivendell is in ninth. I don't think any of us had said that Rivendell was bad. I just don't know that any of us would call it like a top tier competitive list. I don't know. Are either of you surprised? Any of you surprised to see this in the top 10? I think at nine, I'm not surprised to see it at nine.
Judging by the matchup spreads that existed in this tournament, I'm not overly surprised to see it here, especially that sort of like all or nothing build that sacrifices, there's no march or anything in there. It's just wrath, wrath, wrath. Um, which in the instance of veto isn't necessarily a bad thing, because that list absolutely cracks most battle line lists just in general, just because of Wrath of Bruin and the ability to go two-handed, because they can just kill tons of models. Um, Dad and I experienced that in the final round of doubles, where our Gandalf Aragorn army almost completely disintegrated due to just getting wrathed and then chopped to bits by elves. Thankfully, Gandalf was able to survive like 4 turns or something like that, being surrounded by Elrond, and then get out and win the game from there. But it was a very close call. And I think Rivendell, even with the new armies coming out, remains threatening. I actually played a game with Assault on Lothlorien against Rivendell, and it was actually a very tough matchup for it, because the Wraths would just come in and they'd kill like 3 or 4 guys, and knock all my guys to the ground, and really even up the casualty counts. Um, so yeah, I think Rivendell's still really strong, and I'm not surprised it's there.
Yeah, I think it's super solid. I mean, in y'all's last episode, y'all talked about how y'all think it's slightly has the upper hand over Lothlorien, which I really rate Lothlorien, but I think the list is still very strong, obviously. Also, another thing to note, the two scenarios, the two like pools that have the most movement, one of them we didn't play, and the other one it did take a loss in. So having the no march or very light on the Cav did also help them out in that regard that they won all the matchups that aren't heavily reliant on the movement. And since they didn't have any cav or the march, they did lose the matchups or didn't play the matchups that are heavily reliant on movement. So I think that is also something to note with there. But very good list.
That's fair. That's fair.
So, by the way, just to harken back to the last list we talked about, the rule that Evan was thinking of but couldn't name is Ursine Fury. At the beginning of each move phase, before the declare heroic action step, you may roll a d6 for each friendly bear model you have on the battlefield. If any of the d6 roll is a natural 6, then for the duration of the turn, enemy models suffer a -1 penalty to any courage test they're required to take as a result of trying to charge a model with the terror special rule, which basically means the bears. So, I don't know. I can't imagine that tipped a lot of games, but I guess it's a fun little rule that they have now.
I mean, it feels a little complicated for not a ton of reward, but it's nice that it's there, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've only got like 18 figures in this army list anyway, so, adding a little die roll at the beginning of movement, it probably isn't going to cause the game to grind to a halt.
I know.
So, but yeah.
Coming in 8th, I mean, I think this is a surprise. Like competitively, I think this is a surprise to see, but Berger's Horde. I don't necessarily know that any of us rank this especially high. I'm interested to hear what you guys think, seeing it in the top 10 of a large event like this. Now, Sam is a good player. No doubt there. The list that he lost to was Osgiliath, or Reclamation of Osgiliath, rather. Otherwise, he won the remaining 4 of his games. So, what do you guys think about this? This being in the top 10, Matt? Why don't you start us off?
So, Berger's Horde has always been kind of what I thought was a sleeper list.
Interesting.
I don't think I mean, it didn't make my list of dominant lists, and it's not, if we're talking about what are the best evil lists, I'm probably not going to talk about this. But I think this is actually a better evil list than people often give it credit for, just because of that ability to bring on both Birder and a whole bunch of monsters in ambush exactly where you want them, which gets around a lot of the monster problems, which are they tend to get gunned down before they get close by anything that has heavy shooting. And you can also put them in a position where they're, kind of not. You can end up putting them in a position where the enemy's big heroes aren't, and where his vulnerabilities are, and that's kind of a useful thing to do with you can do a lot of damage with those trolls, before Aragorn, whoever kind of the big hitty guy is, repositions to counter them, and that's a pretty useful thing to do. And they're fairly effective trolls as trolls go, because they all basically get, if I'm remembering correctly, they get like an extra die in the duel roll.
Mhm.
They also, I'm fairly sure, have notably high intelligence, which is good for monsters. I'm double checking that now.
Yeah.
Because of the hurls, obviously you make an intelligence check before you.
Their intelligence
Right.
is 7+.
Something cave trolls suffer from.
Yeah, and you could also everything in this army list has both woodland creature and mountain dweller, and if you're in a tournament like Nova that has like a high terrain percentage, you can do all sorts of fancy things with your, having a troll that can ignore terrain is pretty nice, especially if
That
it's
is
going to deploy
actually a
near terrain.
fantastic point. Yeah.
Yeah, it can come out like one side of the woods, slam a bunch of figures, and when the big bad comes over to try and face them, they run back through the woods and out the other side. The big bad's like stuck on the other side
Yeah.
of the woods.
Yeah. For anybody
Which
who
is
is unfamiliar with Nova, whether it's our friends internationally who listen or just players across the country, Nova's boards are unique to Nova. With very few exceptions, you're not going to find as intricate, or in some cases, intricate, complex, or dense boards throughout the vast majority of the United States. Um, Obviously, that's at one of the primary appeals of MESPGA Nova is the fact that you have the opportunity to play on very unique boards, but competitively, I don't know that it tips the scale like significantly, but it's definitely a factor where certain lists that like to play around terrain that might not be as good otherwise, do very well because of it, or do better than they might. And other lists that really like low terrain dense boards may suffer a little bit. But that is actually a really good point to bring up. What about the rest of you guys? What do you think of this? Trey, what do you think about I don't think we've had anybody from the Texas area on the podcast. So is this something that you guys are seeing in Texas, or are you surprised to see this? Well, surprise is relative, but like, what do you think?
Personally, I'm not surprised to see it. I think it's good. I mean, especially considering all of the terrain. I know a lot of areas will have much less terrain, so that you could easily surround a couple pieces of key terrain with some models so that Birder's entire warband can't fully deploy and then they can't deploy there. So I think the terrain does really help in both where they can deploy, as well as Matt pointed out, the Mountain Dweller and woodland creature bonuses. Overall, I would just say it's just really good value for what you're getting out of those heroes and monsters. You're getting good value. The orcs, they do their job. They'll sit there, die slowly. He only took one Warg Chieftain. I really rate Warg Chieftains in that list. It's just got a lot of punching power. That's just good value. And when you've got that many small threats that can do work efficiently, I think there's only a few counters to it that are like, yeah, you're not going to play well into it. Um, Sometimes, from what I've seen, you can play. I think in the hands of a good player, it's very solid. In the hands of a poor player, it's kind of mid, just because you can easily overreach with the ambush rule, and end up throwing your leader into the middle of their army unsupported. But in the hands of somebody like Sam Gallagher, I do really rate the list.
Yeah.
Personally, I've never seen the list taken at a DFW event or any of the Texas ones, but I was not surprised to see it there.
Yeah. The other thing to keep in mind is that your wild warg chieftains and warg riders, if you want to take them with, um, also benefit from the woodland creature and mountain dweller special rules. So they also effectively ignore terrain, which means you have this 10-inch hit squad that can do a tremendous amount of damage, kind of like running from one side of the woods to the other, tearing stuff up, and then kind of running away, which is useful to do.
How many Warg Riders did he have in this list?
He had a
Because
lot.
I
I saw.
agree. I think Warg Riders are something that are definitely very, very strong. I mean, even individually, they're usually the preferred cavalry choice in many evil armies, but with Woodland Creature and Mountain Dweller.
It
Looks
looks
like
like
he
I
had
see
8.
seven in there, 7 or 8. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
count 8, but
that
I
makes
did it
sense.
quickly.
Out of curiosity, were any of them in a Wild Warg Chieftains warband? Because I know there's been some discussion online about whether or not that's legal.
Uh, there were 3 of them in the Wild War Chieftains
Yeah, all right.
Warband.
So, by the way, I think that's the right rule interpretation that they can go in the Wild Warg Chieftains warband, but I know people have kind of gone back and forth on that.
What's the issue with that? I'm not familiar.
So, if I'm remembering correctly, the Wild Warg Chieftain can only have things with the Warg keyword in his warband. And
Doesn't seem correct.
It's the heroic actions. So the
Yeah.
debate
oh,
is
okay,
mainly, can they benefit from
can
like
they
the heroic
benefit from it?
moves?
Okay.
Yeah, because they do technically still have the warg keyword, since they quote unquote share keywords rules as written.
Yep.
Um, And so it's like, can they still benefit from heroic moves and stuff? Which I would
Yeah.
say is still the correct wording since they are counted as one unit.
Yeah. I guess I'm misremembering what the controversy was. I thought it was a deployment thing, but it's a heroic move thing. But all right. So what do we got next after Birder's Horde?
Yeah, in seventh we have Frank Castillo. He was playing Battle of Fornost. Like I said earlier, he took the two big heroes that you have to take, and then he took Círdan and a Dunedain captain with the six Hobbit archers. Like that variation a lot. I think this is a list that we had said we thought would perform well, and I think this is the highest Fornost ranking. I'm not surprised to see this. This is a very good list. What do you guys have any, I mean, significant thoughts? He ultimately lost his last table game, but it was a very close game as well.
Yep. Did you play him, Trey?
I did not. I was on the table right below him.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So that's right. He would have played the second place guy. So yeah, I can't remember exactly how that game turned out, but yeah, Fornost is a good list, especially since there were a lot of monsters at Nova
Yeah.
running around, and Fornost is good against monsters with the Aarnor with I will match your fight value and then strike up, and Glorfindel with the I I will start at your fight value and then straight up strike up with
And
an
then
Elven
go
Blade.
two-handed and get +1 because he gets +1 to win against. He's really good against monsters, is
Yeah,
the
yeah,
summary.
yeah. So and by the way, they can't rend him or do any of that funky stuff to him afterwards if he loses on the off chance. Um, yeah. So good list.
Yeah.
What's next?
Yeah,
I
not to
guess
glaze over.
a quick tangent.
Yeah. Oh
Is
boy.
this is something I noticed a lot when playing doubles with Dad is how much Aragorn and Gandalf were going two-handed. It felt like they were going two-handed almost more often than they were not going two-handed. Um, and I think it's an interesting case study in the value of two-handed, not necessarily on warriors, though it is still even then good on warriors, but on heroes. Because especially models like Glorfindel, who I believe has been performing much better this edition than last edition, mainly because of the increased hitting power he has from being able to go two-handed with his Elven Blade, um, and just the ability to throw down, 4 dice with a banner reroll. You'll pretty reliably roll a 6, and then when you win the fight, these heroes that might not necessarily be able to do enough damage without doing it are now suddenly able to do a ton of damage going two-handed. So it was interesting. This is the first time I've really used heroes that can reliably go two-handed or have two-handed weapons. So it was interesting to be using those so heavily.
Yeah, that was kind of a thing. Um, although kind of once you kind of burn through it, that's really a trick you can get away with when you have one might left, and then once that might goes away, you start to be a little cagier about the two-handed.
Fair enough.
But
Moving on to sixth place, we have a pretty familiar name on the East Coast, Ted Cantu. We'll end up, we might talk about it now, we might end up talking about it a little bit later, but Matt played Ted in the final round. So I think the fact that Ted lost the game, the final round, and still managed to be sixth overall is indicative of how well he did throughout the entire tournament. I will read this one off. Not that Fields of Celebrant is a challenging list to comprehend, but just so that people know, since it's kind of lesser seen, it was Earl the Young with 15 Sons of Earl, a King of Man with lance and horse, 3 Warriors of Minas Tirith with shield, 7 Warriors of Minas Tirith with shield and spear, 2 Citadel Guard with longbow, and a Captain of Rohan on horse. Um, the name of his list is "Don't Talk to Me or My Son." I'm assuming it says it 15 times because he has 15 sons of Earl. Ever again. Clever there. 30 models, 700 even. This is not a list that we haven't seen because I've seen this at the tournament that you hosted at just a few weeks ago. What do we think about this? What do we think? Are we up on the Son of Ural stock net this edition that they can get Fight 5 and they got back their 2 attack space? What are we thinking?
So this list, having played it, is this is the right way to take this list with like just maxing out the Sons of Earl. And this list you know, is absolutely terrifying in the right scenario. I mean, if you were in a scenario where you can't like hide in terrain for this from this list, um, it is absolutely devastating. Fighting like 15 fight 5, 3 attack cavalry on the charge. And the only reason I was able to win this game was because we ended up rolling into playing Heirlooms of Ages Past, and the very first token that I ran into was the heirloom, and it happened to be right next to a big giant dead Mumak that we had already agreed was going to be difficult terrain. So the guy who finds the heirloom grabs it and immediately runs up onto the Mumak and like stayed there on top of the Mumak while the rest of my army kind of died around him for like 6 consecutive turns, and was basically able to um, hold off the army for long enough to kind of win the game.
You
And
didn't
even
kill
then, it
many
was
of the sons, right?
no, I only killed like 4 of them, I think, and
You
that was even
dismounted
with
a bunch of them.
yeah, but even so, because I mean, part of the reason was I ended up Aragorn like couldn't fight for the first like 3 turns of the game because he had to be kind of like in a position like out of the fight where he could still call the heroic move so that I could charge his front line to avoid getting charged and get my one guy running over and getting the one other objective marker that I needed because the new heirlooms of ages past. I think we talked about this. You get a victory point for each one of the objectives that isn't the heirloom that you pick up. And Ted grabbed 4 of them, and I needed to grab one, which was very important because it ended up being 9-7 to me. Um, so if he had been able to grab that last objective, it would have been a draw. But in order to do that, I had to take Aragorn kind of out of the fight for 3 turns to kind of make it happen. Um, and but I was not really able to make an appreciable dent. I mean, basically what I was doing was throwing guys into choke points just to kind of buy time as these choke points, as he kind of like was able to like fight through the rough terrain around these choke points to get through. It was very much like the opening scene of like A New Hope, where I've got a bunch of guys kind of defending this corridor that Darth Vader is coming down, and it's just like shut the door. That was happening at like 2 or 3 points on this battlefield as he was trying to wend his way around. But yeah,
There you go, Ted.
this
That's
army
your
in a
new nickname.
this army in a maneuvering scenario is just going to be deadly. So
One question.
It's very good.
The King of Men, you mentioned that he had the horse and the lance. Did you like skip over, or did he in fact have the shield and heavy armor, or was he going in there D5?
He was
no, I
definitely
think
going in there.
he was
I think he
D6.
was.
I think he
Well,
didn't
yeah.
have the shield,
So
if
no
I'm
shield.
remembering correctly.
Paid
I-
100 points for him. I know he didn't have the shield because I heard him talk about that in
Yeah.
a different game.
Which
if
is
he
interesting
was,
to me.
yeah, I don't know why you would not take the heavy armor and take the shield. Then, I mean, take the heavy armor and not take the shield. That's just mathematically incorrect. Um, so I
I don't think he
assume
had
he
the
had
shield.
neither of
I don't
them.
think he had
Yeah,
either because he was
I assume
100.
he had
I mean, it was
neither of
100
them.
points.
I
Yeah, I
thought
didn't either.
no, I'm pretty sure he had the heavy armor and was D6 because at one point he was fighting Gandalf like the whole game. And at one point Gandalf won the fight and we were trying to figure out what I needed to wound him, and I needed to wound him on 5s. I know I didn't need to wound him on 4s.
Okay, that's odd.
Theodore,
Um,
Theodore, Theodore. Let me pull up the profile.
yeah,
I've played them.
that's
They're
not.
they're D5 and they go up to D7 with the shield and heavy armor. It's interesting because like I would always take them with the shield because around here I'm like the Realms of Men player. I normally run a King of Gondor, a King of Numenor, and then a Captain of Gondor, and then normally about 40 models, 10 of them being which Cav, and then just a shield wall of Gondor flanked by Numenorians.
Yeah.
But I find the shields the best option just because they are not good fighters.
Yeah, he may actually have had the shield. The reason why it's sticking in my head is because I remember when he put because I dismounted him, and I remember when he put his dismount down, he was saying this dismount isn't accurate. It either doesn't have something. It
I,
either didn't have something he had or had something he didn't have.
I
Um, but so,
For,
but I know he
for
wasn't naked.
I
advice for people at home, always take the shield before upgrading the armor to heavy armor because it's just mathematically better. You get +1 defense and the ability to shield, and if you take the heavy armor, you just get the +1 defense. So always take the shield before the heavy armor.
So what
Um,
you're hearing is take the heavy armor and not the shield, guys. That's what you learned here.
Yep.
yes, if you play against me specifically, do exactly that.
Unless the figure that you're using doesn't have a shield and has heavy armor, but which may have been the case. But I can't remember. In any case, it wasn't material. And but it was that is a terrifying list. So I think that needs to go on to the lists with AOL because one of the things Ted did is he ran over Assault on Lothlorien with this list. He
I'm
said
not surprised.
he broke it in like 3 turns.
I'm not
Um,
surprised at
I
all, yeah.
mean, Assault on Lothlorien has always struggled with those sorts of rush down, like all cav, kill a bunch of models sort of thing,
yeah,
because it relies on sort of slowly whittling down the opponent and then killing the heroes with its bats and stuff. And if the entire thing just gets run over immediately, then it can't really do that. Um, so yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it's hard to go wrong with a fight 5, 3 attack, 20-point cavalry model. So I'm not too surprised about it. I was actually surprised it wasn't getting great results earlier, at least from what I had seen, because it seemed like, spamming a bunch of Sons of Earl would be really strong. But now it obviously has those results to back it up. It was on table 1 in the final round, and it came, what, sixth?
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Do they
yeah.
still get the +1 strength on the charge for the cavalry?
No.
Okay, I
They
was
do
gonna say
not.
because they're already
And they
strength 4 to begin with, so strength
yeah, I
5 would be crazy.
was gonna say and they don't need it.
They do not.
Definitely not.
um, yeah, no, you're right. For 20 points a pop, I think they're undercosted
Oh
in this
yeah,
list.
their weakness is only being able to take 15 of them.
Yeah, exactly.
Fair enough.
Well, and the other weakness being able to find 15 of them.
Yeah. If you compare them to similar tier, similarly priced cavalry models, like for example, Knights of Dol Amroth, the comparison is very striking. Just the sheer amount of resources the Suns get compared to the non-to attack cavalry models that also make it to 20 points.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
And the ability to like reroll wounds once a game too on an initial charge is terrifying as well. But all right, what do we got next?
We have Julian. I'll quickly read off his list just because it's a little non-traditional. It's a Chieftain, 8 orcs a spear, 4 Crebain, Oathmaker, 8 orcs a spear, 4 Crebain, Gorl, 8 orcs a spear, 4 Crebain, Chieftain, 5 orcs with spear, 2 Crebain, Chieftain. So a lot of might, a lot of birds. I want to say he's around 46 models, something to that effect.
48.
Um, 48 models. There you go. He did very well. This was another opponent of Matt's, so Matt will be able to kind of talk a little bit more to this. Um, I don't know. Like the birds are very good. I feel like I don't know. White Hand without Saruman still seems like not the right move, personally, in my opinion. And then I would say I'm a little bit, I don't know what the ration, it just, you want a lot of birds, I guess, because usurpers of Edoras, you would think would be the obvious choice. I mean, he wanted orcs and he wanted fearless
I think, yeah.
Crebain,
From when
which
I've talked to him, it was all the dumb and Oathmaker that is what he wanted, the reroll ones and the fearless.
that's entirely reasonable. I mean, to be fair, I don't know what you guys think about this. I can't say that I'm surprised to see a heavy Crebain list in the top five. Matt, obviously, you have more to say about this than probably anybody from the
Yeah.
like a
So this was the ultimate expression of Crebain creep. Um, and this is the most Crebain I've ever seen deployed anywhere at 14. Um, and I talked to Julian about this a lot afterwards, and he just wanted to try and test the theory of can I win with just a bunch of Crebain, and it almost worked. It probably would have worked against me, except the scenario we ended up in was retrieval, and uh, I set up in a position where I kind of fainted with Aragorn out to try and say, well, maybe I'm going to go after your. So retrieval is the one where it's like capture. You split the board like a sandwich diagonally, and then you're playing capture the flag with two objectives that you're trying to grab and move, and the birds significantly can't move the objective. So in order to win this, in order to get points on the board, unless he was going to like kill my heroes, he needed to punch some orcs through to get into this stuff. And I basically made a half-hearted feint with Aragorn toward his objective, and then he basically just used. At that point, he was kind of coming at me because one thing his list did not have was any bows at all. So he had no answer to the tactic that I eventually used, which was I'm going to take my whole army, I'm going to deploy it around my objective in a circle, with not enough room for a bird to land in the middle, and see you off. Because the obvious response to that is, all right, I'm going to take if we got 48 models, I'm going to take my 16 bows and just plink at you till you're whittled down, and then run in and grab the objective. He didn't have that option, so he had to come in. And he just was never able to kind of bust through my ring of steel surrounding that objective. And in doing it, he got a captain, he got a chieftain that like a little too close to Aragorn, so that Aragorn was able to do a heroic combat off of the guys he was fighting into that chieftain, kill that chieftain. And in this scenario, in retrieval, you get 1 point for each hero that you kill. So at that point, I was up 1-0, and he kind of had to come after me. At that point, he couldn't, kind of break off, and he was never able to break through. But I think this was another situation where I got lucky in the scenario where I had to face him, because I think in any scenario where I had to like come out of my ball, it was going to be rough, because as soon as you can kind of put multiple birds into Aragorn or Gandalf, they're like stuck for the rest of the game effectively, because he's got 14 and he can just rotate them in and out as I do wounds towards him. And the one scenario they don't want to have is where they are having to do like a frontal assault on a shield wall, where whenever a bird comes in, it's fighting either Gandalf or Aragorn or four spearmen who can like do 3 wounds to it in one turn, and then it's like you can't risk the bird again. Um, so this was another one where I just kind of got saved by a scenario selection.
Yeah,
Um,
it
it's
was a
interesting
fascinating
that
like table to look at, because you did just have like this swirling circle
yeah,
of a condor in the middle, and then like birds like all over the place. He's cycling them in and out because they're getting wounded. It was pretty. I didn't know until I just read the list that he had no bows. That does seem like a mistake. I'm sure he's probably. I mean, I think the mistake. We were talking about this a lot. Like tournaments, it's so weird when you get to a tournament, because it's one thing to play well, and then it's another thing to like have all of the other little things in consideration, like not vetoing, unfortunately for Julian, I mean, not vetoing retrieval was a pretty glaring mistake to leave that up to chance.
Honestly, I feel it was almost a tournament losing mistake
It
for him,
was. I mean, well,
because
in this case, yeah,
it
it
was gonna be
absolutely was.
so much more difficult for Dad in obviously it wasn't gonna be destroy the supplies because Dad vetoed that because that Julian would have just auto won. Um, but either seize the prizes or what's the other one? Treasure hoard?
Treasure Hoard. Yeah, he
Either
vetoed
one of
Treasure Hoard.
those,
Yep.
he could just send the Crebain forward and fight your army, and then use his orcs to grab up all the objectives. And it was just going to be very hard for you to win that. But he didn't end up doing that. Um, so yeah, that was definitely a big tournament deciding moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, we'll talk about this a little more when we get to the veto system, but I am just to preview that. I came out of this tournament. I went into this tournament kind of undecided of the veto system, and I came out of this tournament being a huge proponent of the veto system in this edition.
Yeah, I completely
Because
agree.
yeah, and we'll chat about that in a bit. But that's and it's for this reason that the 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 summary is basically that it creates a situation where you have at least some play to get out of the scenarios where you just don't have a prayer. Because
Yeah.
there's a lot of scenarios in certain matchups where you just don't have a prayer. But all right, what do we got next?
Um, all right, yeah. So in fourth place, now we're getting into the undefeated. Um, List near and dear to my heart. It is the Shire. This is a list that we've talked a lot about on this podcast now. And this is 3 episodes in a row where the Shire is coming up in conversation. This is, of course, my pick for the best good list in the game. I think actually all of us had agreed that it might be the best good list in the last episode. That's neither here nor there entirely. I know we've kind of bounced back and forth between amongst ourselves about the way to build this. Adam essentially took what has been my build. I've been experimenting with Bilbo instead of Lotho at 700, but essentially, it's the heroes that you want: Gandalf, Lobelia, Rosie, Farmer Maggot, Hamfast, Paladin, Will, and Lotho. So you're getting all of the kind of stacking abilities that you can get. Yeah, I think he has max bows, so somewhere it's like 21 bows. Um, 12 sheriffs. The only like I mean, looking at it, the only thing that I personally would end up doing differently is I wouldn't put he put Lobelia and Rosie in Gandalf's warband. I like to put Lobelia in one of the other Hobbit heroes warbands just so that if the army needs to be apart, the hobbits are not totally left on their own. But what do you guys think about this? So Trey, you'll be able to talk about this more than anybody else in terms of actually understanding Adam playing it because you guys played round 3, was it?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so why don't you kick us off? What do you think about the Shire? Is this something that you've played before, or was Nova your first time
Yes.
against it?
So I have been painting up a Hobbit army for like a year and a half now. It's
Aha.
a slog. I've played one game with it and it's so impressive I will never take it again. So now I'm switched and I've been playing the Battle of the Greenfields, which I painted up my Bull Roarer yesterday. But it is very powerful. Like I played once with it and I was like, holy moly, this is insane. And I mean it is just that. There is very little counterplay. I would say monsters are a great counterplay, which I think could have lent to a lot of people taking monsters simply because Lobelia can't shut them down, especially monsters with might. You can just, if you get one win off, you can throw a hurl into the cart and disassemble the most oppressive part of the list. It is very good. I also would consider it the best in the game. Also, one of the least enjoyables to play against, simply because all of your fun heroes that you get to bring do nothing the entire game. Thankfully for me, I had Blessing of Valor with Gandalf, which I just kept casting over and over again on Gwaihir. So Gwaihir was pretty much unaffected our entire game. Um, Our game was actually really interesting because he made the mistake early of separating Paladin's Warband and Assassination. We were in the kill pool, so going into it, I was like, okay, this will be chill. I'll veto to the death, and the others I can compete in decently enough. And then it was between Lords of Battle and Assassination, and we rolled into Assassination. But I quickly just marched over, killed Paladin and his entire warband, and then I proceeded to pretty much just run away the rest of the game. We eventually like caught back into combat with like 30 minutes left after he kept sorcerers blasting and eventually killed Hilda, which at that point I knew it was a 12-9 victory point game. And so I was like, I need to do something. So I got in, got the hurl off on Gandalf's cart, got Gwahir into Gandalf for like 4 straight turns. Couldn't roll higher than a 2 on all of those. It was really weird situation. Everything was going weird. Um, and then like randomly one of my elf cav kept getting surrounded and kept staying alive. It was super weird on dice. And then on the last turn, he had 3 Hobbit archers pass like 3 in the ways on like one of the walls, and then 2 elves to kill Gandalf, which was quite hilarious because Gandalf's just sitting there and like, I just got killed by 3 Hobbit archers, which came out as a 12-12 draw. Honestly, any scenario other than the pool 4 scenarios, I think it is just so powerful and so oppressive. Because the only reason I was able to compete is because I had that constant pressure with Gandalf and his blessing, or I guess his protection of the Valar on Gwahir, and then Gwahir not being able to be shut down by Lobelia. I also did get rid of Lobelia quite early. He put her forward to shut down Gandalf for a turn, and then I was able to throw 2 elves into her and kill her. Um, it's it's very good. I think I definitely lucked out in which pool I played him in. I think if any other pool, it would have been a much harder game. He played it well. I think the only mistake he made was separating Paladin's warband early, and then also he stayed in formation the entire game instead of spreading out to catch me earlier, which definitely could have helped him out in being able to break me because I was actually closer to breaking him than he was to breaking me. I was like 3 hobbits off, I believe, because I was counting. So like, if I can get break scenarios, it's over. And I was like 5 or 6 off break. But it was a very interesting game to say the least, and I think it was a very powerful force.
Fair enough. I do think that for a tournament like Nova at 700, as much as it kills me to get rid of Lotho, and because you have to get rid of Lotho, and then you end up losing 3 models overall to take Bilbo. Bilbo's a little bit more expensive. I think at a tournament like Nova, where you have so many different players and like list variations, you almost have to take Bilbo just so that you have a more consistent answer to the monster lists. Hobbits, I think, to your point, Trey, I do think that monsters represent the like biggest challenge for the army because outside of Gandalf, there are Gandalf and Sam, which I know, Matt, you're much more keen on taking Sam than I am. Um, Besides Gandalf and Sam, no other model in the list has strike, so even the ring is limited because you're talking about fight 3 Hobbit heroes because they don't get +1 from Will's bonus. So it is a bit kind of touchy. But yeah, that is a big monsters do represent a good counterplay for hobbits. Do you, Matt, Evan, any thoughts about this?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this, but I think
We've talked about
really,
hobbits a lot. Yeah,
yeah,
this isn't that untraditional of a build.
I think really the number one thing that holds this back is the fact that these are metal models and you need 70 of them or at least 58 of them to kind of make an army.
Yeah.
And it
And
takes a while to
I
paint them up.
this was part of the reason why I said we were right, because we said the Shire would do well. The one person that took the Shire did very, very well. Um, so
Yep.
there you go.
Yeah. All right, moving on.
I guess the
Yeah.
one other thing to point out is, and I think this may have borne out in the game, is that the object scenarios are somewhat of a weakness for this army, just because it is so muddle and slow. Um, and this is an army I think with a scenario based weakness.
I would agree with that. Also,
How does that pool work? Because it's
It's the one where you generally have to like run to the center, get something, and then do something with
What
it.
did what
yeah.
did they play
They played.
Um,
I was next to him during that game. They played Treasure Horde, but he was against Kaza Doom, so they both had the exact same issue.
Okay.
So like
Yeah.
it was a very interesting game to be
they
sitting
grabbed
next to and
three.
watching
The other guys
Yeah.
grabbed
because
three.
those are
Yep.
both their biggest weakness playing each other. I would say the hardest thing in the object scenarios is you don't have the compel anymore. I was missing compel a lot with my Gwai and Gandalf combination, but it really does hurt with the Shire simply because you can't control where their objectives are going. I would say it would
Mhm.
be much better for them if they had compel and were able to bring the enemies with objectives back forwards towards their army. But I would say I would agree. The object scenarios is probably the worst pool for them, simply because if an enemy can get them, it's not that hard to stall hobbits from killing, considering it's very hard for hobbits to kill in general.
You really have to play. I think what I've learned, having played as many Hobbit games as I have now, like obviously the list is good at killing, but our like controlling certain aspects of the game, but obviously with scenarios that isn't always necessarily the primary aim of the game. I think the biggest determination is how well you defend the cart, but also how well you play the dogs, because they're the only maneuverability play that you have, and you just quite literally cannot afford to have them die.
Yeah. They also
Um,
can't pick up objects though,
no,
unfortunately.
no, no. So I mean, they're not picking up anything, but from the perspective of like controlling distance on the board, if you're not playing the dogs right, you are in quite a bit of trouble. I
Mhm.
find that a lot of games that I play them poorly, the game is a lot. Now, granted, I haven't lost yet with Hobbits, but the closer games tend to be ones where I misplay the dogs. All right, Trey. I don't know if you have do you have your list up front in front of you? I mean,
I
there's
do
no
have
need
my
for me to read
list.
it off when you're
Uh,
with us.
So I took a Battle of Five Armies, and originally I was actually looking at taking the Wolves of Isengard, but I ended up taking this because I was on Reddit looking around and people were just bashing on the Lake Town Militia, and so I was like, screw it, I'm gonna take 26 Lake Town Militia. So I took Gandalf, Hilda Bianca with 4 Lake Town Militia with light shields, um, 14 Lake Town Militia with spears, and 8 Lake Town Militia with bows. So no, I did not come anywhere near to maxing out my bows. That's neither here nor there. I also ended up taking Tariel without the bow again, with 5 Mirkwood elves with shields and 3 Mirkwood knights, and then rounding it off was Gwaihir. Um, it's a very different build to what I've been seeing from the Battle 5 armies, but I love the composition, and it's probably my favorite list I've been playing all year, other than my Wolves of Isengard. I mean, what are y'all's thoughts?
So we're all silent because none of us have played against this.
Yeah,
Yes.
honestly, not even anything like it.
Yeah, I was definitely surprised to see. Did you say you took light shields in that
I did
list?
take light shields.
Walk us take us on a magical trip through the reasoning behind the presence of these light
A
shields.
magical
Honestly,
trip.
this this may even surprise you. I wish I had more of them in the list. Honestly, I wish I had 5 or 6. I think they're good in small amounts, especially with Lake Town. I play them a lot like I used to play Orcs and Angmar. You're simply playing a slow die list. The way I specifically played this was a heavy skirmish list, so I would run in, cast magic, do a couple wounds, and then I would run away for a couple turns and then go back in and would keep repeating that. Really, just because you don't actually want the Lake Town fighting at all. So I would keep the guys with the light shields either on objectives or on the far flanks, where they're most likely to be caught out. And just the ability just to shield on far flanks or specifically objectives, I found super useful because they are very bad at winning fights, but having that extra attack basically from shielding was just super useful. And then just also only having 5 elves in the list um, was also just I needed more defensive output, and I would rather have the light shield since they're a bit more flexible than having spears up front, never using their spears.
Aaron, at this point, like, what would you have said? What was your toughest game, do you think?
My toughest game, definitely the last game. The
Okay.
final game I played Zachariah or Zachary, and that was a game he had Men of the West with a Gwaihir of his own. So it was Aragorn, Gwaihir, and a captain. It was just super weird because we were playing Maelstrom the final round. I ended up spending 4 or 5 points of might or something to come on because Aragorn had come on because he deployed first, and then he threw in Hilda's warband literally right behind him. So I was in this, well, if I don't might it up with Tariel's warband, Hilda's going to get killed, and then Tariel will be popping up right by Gwaihir, which I don't want. And so I was like, I'll use 2 points of might on Tariel. The mistake I made there is instead of coming on directly to support Hilda Bianca's warband, I put her on the opposite side of Aragorn's warband with 0 spears. So then when I rolled a 2 again on Gandalf's roll, I kind of had used the might to help support Tariel's warband as well as I just needed the magic support to help deal with Aragorn. And then Gwaihir, I put him on over there just so that I could try to wipe out his warband in one go. It was really interesting though, because then the next turn his captain did arrive and came in right behind my Gandalf. So then it was like this weird sandwich of I had my Hilda Bianca on one side, he had his Aragorn, I had my elves and Gandalf, and then he had his captain. And that I just damage mitigated. I threw my light shields, a couple bowmen over there. I did throw 2 cav by almost manipulating the control zone of his captain with a weird piece of terrain. And so I flash killed his captain turn 1 with 2 of my knights, which was very fun. Just one of them ran in two-handed, the other one stayed normal. They won the fight with the Elven Blade and killed him. That was big because at that point I had 4 or 5 points of might on the table total, and he had free might plus all of his. Um, it was just this really weird slog. And then I only cast 2 spells successfully the entire game, one of which did go off, but it was in a time where it was just I didn't want Aragorn to combat through all of my guys turn 1. But that turn, Gwaihir couldn't get into him. The rest of the game, it was just me threatening him with Gwaihir over and over again and him continuing to heroic strike. He ended up breaking me by 1 model in the end. And then the last turn was obviously the weirdest. We had a weird defend a doorway controversy, which ended up being a nothing because he was outside of 3 inches anyways or something. So that one wasn't as big. But then the more interesting one was on one of the objectives, I had 2 Lake Town. One of them was out of line of sight of Gwaihir behind a building. And so he decided to barge off my other one and jump up on top of the building with his barge bonus so that he could see him the following turn, completely forgetting that if I quartered him this turn, he would be outside of those 3 inches. And then Gandalf successfully got the quartering wound with a friend on one random guy, quartering him, and then I had that objective completely because Gwaihir was on top of a building instead of down on the ground within the 3 inch radius, which gave me a 9-7 minor win or something. Maybe it was 7-5. It was something very small, but it was such an interesting game.
Fair enough. And kind of to the point of, I can chime in very quickly, just since Evan and I both were judges. Evan, I think our general policy at Nova, just because the door came up as a kind of a judge's ruling, or I had some kind of role in it. If players agree to something that is wrong on the table and they play out the game that way, we're not going to intervene. If we see something and it's clear that both players like have agreed to play it this way, then that's that. If you invite a judge to a table to make a ruling, then we're creating the right interpretation and enforcing the right type of play on the board. So it's a very kind of fine line. So in that case, it was a situation where, if I recall right, Zach said, my guy is defending a doorway. Trey called me over um, I don't remember what exactly you asked, talk
It was
about how
because
doorways worked.
he was in a big 50 millimeter wide doorway, and since he sat
Yeah.
in the middle, he was like, "Oh yeah, my guy's in this doorway," and so I was like, "Okay, I'll just charge him and kill him and get the objective." And then he was like, "Oh, I'm getting the defend a doorway bonus," and I was like, "In the rules, it specifies it has to be in a gap where no more than 1 model can fit, and since 2 models
Yeah.
can't fit side by side, it doesn't count." And then we had a bit of controversy over that, so we called over Alisher to get that
And
settled.
then at that point, open the book, had the correct rule.
Yeah.
So that's general. I know every tournament's a little bit different. Like when we were at Nations Cup, when my game was streamed, we had a judge's interjection. It really had no bearing on the outcome of the game in any which way. But some tournaments, I think that's if you're playing at a tournament, quite honestly, that might be a good thing to know just because it can have an effect. You have to be your own advocate at probably 90% of tournaments. Judges are not, I don't know, Evan, you can feel free to chime in on this. Like, judges aren't really there to like teach you how to play the game. So if we see something that's wrong, unless it's abundantly clear that like manipulation is at play, we're not really going to jump in.
I mean, I think just to add on a little bit, it depends.
Okay.
It depends on how active the judges are in like going around to the tables and stuff like that. And it also depends on the number of tables. Using the example of Nova, there's just so many tables.
Hmm.
Like we can't go around and like go, oh, your bat's up there, but they can't climb up there, so your bat can't actually be up on that building, or stuff like that, because it's just unreasonable to do. Um, so I think it is important if you are a tournament goer, if you think something is wrong or you are confused about something, first check the book, please. Because I made a lot of rulings that were like you could have taken 10, 20 seconds to check the book and didn't have to call me over. Um, but secondly, call one of us over and we'll figure it out for you guys. Because we're not like hawks over your table going like, oh, you're playing that rule wrong, play it right. That's not our job.
All right, fair enough. To second place. Because that was kind of a little bit boring, fair enough. But second place was Connor Fenton, Men of the West, very traditional build for Men of the West. Alisher Legolas, Captain of Minas Tirith. I don't know. He had somewhere in the vicinity of mid 30 models total. I don't know. Do we have too many thoughts about this list? This is a list that I feel like we're all pretty aware of. It's a good list all around. I don't know that anybody can criticize it too much.
There's nothing really to
I think it's
criticize. This
good.
is probably one of the most popular lists around here. I will note, did he have a physical banner in that list, or was it without a physical banner?
He didn't have a banner. He just had a.
Okay, that's interesting. So that means all three of the top three lists went in there without a banner, which I find kind of interesting how everybody's talking about how it's even more essential than last edition to have banners, but all three top lists at Nova did not have physical banners.
Well, I think it is not as essential as it has been before the new 24 scenario selection thing came out. And
I
it's
would agree.
certainly less essential in a veto system
Yep.
where you can pick off the scenarios that give you like 4 points, where you're behind 4 points if you don't have a banner.
It
Um,
is also important to emphasize that were it not for these victory points, these lists simply would not run a banner at all. They wouldn't even consider it, because your list tray obviously cannot take a banner.
Yep.
Um, and the Men of the West ones, they've got a 6-inch Aragorn banner, so why spend the extra 25 points? Um, and I do agree with Dad. The expansion of these scenarios to 24 has lessened the pressure of taking a banner a bit, and also the veto system also lessens that pressure. So I think it's not unreasonable to see this.
Fair enough. He played Frank last round. They played a pretty tense game of Command the Battlefield. Connor ended up coming out on top with one victory point to go completely undefeated with all wins. All right, so Matt, the time is yours. Why don't you give us a rundown of virtually the same list, very similar list you took the
yeah.
doubles. Nah, I guess you won all 8 games that you played with this style of list. So what's the rundown?
Yeah, so I mean, this is, I don't know, Evan and I were talking about this. I would analogize this list to, if this was a race car, this was like an F1 race car where it's all about performance with, kind of nothing extra for like crew protection or anything like that. And if you have a crash, you're dead. And if you don't have a crash, then it kind of performs really well. And I was lucky enough to get through this without a crash. And one of the things I was lucky enough to get through this having run into, I mean, the first two scenarios I played, the first was against uh, uh, it was the Champions of Erebor list. Um, that was like all dwarves, which Aragorn cut through pretty quickly. The second one I played was a uh, Grief of Eamor list, which had like there was like a river bisecting the board, and like half his army started on one side, half like started someone in the middle on one side of the list, and half was on the other side of the river, and there was a bridge kind of going laterally. And this was one where I was able to just basically block off the bridge, and we were playing, I think, Command the Battlefield. So we had like center objective and then 4 ones around, and I was able to take the center objective, block off the bridge, and then basically use the rest of my army to eat the small warband that was on my side of the river, and then kind of eat the next warband that was kind of struggling through the river to get to me. And then at that point, come around and kind of crush the third warband, which was trying to fight its way across the bridge from both sides. And these are those two armies are both what this army is built to do, because it's very mobile. It has 2 very hard hitting heroes that can do a tremendous amount of damage in a small amount of time. And if it can kind of like overwhelm pieces of an army sequentially, it's very difficult to stop. And then I started hitting the problem scenarios. And I think third scenario was Contest of Champions, and it was Contest of Champions against Assault on Lothlorien. And I was a bit of a sneakster in this, because instead of playing like, I won the roll off for choosing sides. Instead of doing the usual across the table thing, I elected to play side by side, which gave me 2 things. It gave me like a small terrain piece that was in the middle of the board, that Aragorn, right in the middle of where the 2 champions were going to face off, that Aragorn could kind of come out and fight partially behind. Because the strategy for Assault on Lothlorien and Contest of Champions is you take all your archers and all your throwing weapons, you put them behind a screen of something, and then whatever the enemy's champion charges into, you shoot everything into that combat to kill whatever he's going to try and kill in heroic combat off of, and then try and wound him. And between this little terrain piece and the blinding light of Gandalf coming up, he wasn't really able to effectively do that. But I think if I'd been playing a different scenario, I would have had a lot of trouble about that, because I've only got 24 figures in the warband or in the army, and you just can't, when he's shooting into combat, you just can't take those casualties, even if he's only hitting on 6 with Gandalf the White. He also had I think 2 Wild War chieftains in that, one of which was his champion that fortunately had to spend a lot of time running away from Aragorn, which was useful. But then the army after that was the one we already talked about, with the 14 Crebanes, which again, if I'd had a different scenario, I think my goose would have been cooked there, because I couldn't have gotten through 14 Crebanes with Aragorn and Gandalf. And then the last one I think we already talked about was Ted with his 15 Sons of Earl, where there was a lot of luck that went into that victory. First getting heirlooms of ages past, and then finding the heirloom straight off the bat and being able to hide it someplace in rough terrain.
Now, I'm just curious, like, I have pretty much the mentality of either I'm vetoing heirlooms or my opponent is vetoing heirlooms, because I don't know, I just don't like the variability. Now, I've seen this come up. This happened at the tournament you hosted, Matt, where Evan and Caleb play games where they didn't veto heirlooms. You obviously, neither you nor Ted vetoed heirlooms. What's the thought there?
So one of my thoughts was all of my odds in all the other scenarios were significantly worse, because
what did he veto?
Let's see, because we chatted about this.
Probably Old Ground.
Yes, he vetoed Hold Ground. You're right.
Why though? Because
the Men of the West gets all the dominant two.
And I can just take a nice tight ball of guys and walk them into the center. And
You're
I
right.
think
Okay.
at number 2.
I
I
guess there
still
is
don't
an
know whether that was the right
argument.
decision for him, though.
I think there is a line where you just send all of the sons into your army that's trying to get to the objective, and then he takes his foot guys and sends them on the objective. And basically, he uses the captain of Rohan to march the 15 inches, get in your face, stop you from getting in the center, and then basically fights you there. And I don't think that fight would have gone bad for him, especially with the Fight Five and all of the Sons of Earl that could crack through your warriors in Minas Tirith. If I were him, I think vetoing heirlooms might have been the better choice, but it's an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, so empirically, vetoing heirlooms probably was the worst choice. However, that's with 2020 hindsight, knowing that he ended up rolling what he needed to get his entire army on where he wanted it. Um,
Mhm.
and that, there's no guarantee that would happen. If he ends up in a situation where like he rolls a 1 on Earl's deployment and like none of his sons come on, or even just like the captain rolls the 1 or something like that and ends up someplace completely detached from where his cav are, I can probably there are circumstances where I can probably get to the center um, quicker than he can, and there's a lot of terrain in the center of that board that I could have kind of hit in and kind of cordoned off and made difficult for him. But 2020 hindsight, obviously, we ended up with heirlooms and everything went wrong for him as far as heirloom distribution. But
Do
he
we
didn't know
have
that.
a fifth podcast member over there, Alisher,
My
that
dog.
I saw?
The
Pig
canine
chilling by the
companion,
desk. Yeah, she gives me all my strategic advice.
right? So yeah, I mean heirlooms is kind of like a crapshoot. And
It seems like it. It's the Wild West. That's what
I
it
mean,
looked like.
and sometimes like in this situation, what I wanted was the crapshoot, right? Because at least I had a shot at the crapshoot, as opposed to a sure loss in one of the other
Yeah,
scenarios.
I see why you wanted to play heirlooms. I'm kind of surprised that he didn't want to get rid of it.
Yeah, I
Because I
mean,
mean,
whole ground could have
just even
gone
looking at how it played out, you got to 2 of them, he got to 4 of them.
right. But look, if he'd found that heirloom, if one of those other 4 had been the heirloom, I just wouldn't have even been in the game because
Yeah.
he would have gotten it, and then I would have spent tremendous amounts of time getting over there, and he could have just cannonballed all of his cav into me um, while I'm in the open trying to get it. But I happened to find the heirloom and win it. And
Hey,
he was more likely to get to more of the heirlooms than I
he
was.
was. You're right.
Um,
You're right. He
so
was. Fair enough.
I'm not sure in the end, and things could also have gone disastrously bad for him in hold ground if the way
True.
the deployment dice came out and I got to the center and basically hunkered down amongst bad terrain. He's got a problem. So
This is fair.
it's
This
it's
is
hard.
fair.
2020 hindsight, yeah, he guessed wrong, but take away that hindsight, I'm not sure he guessed wrong. So
Yeah. Fair enough. I mean, like I said this to Evan at the beginning of the tournament. Whatever nobody was considering was that you had destiny on your side, Matt, and it was just meant to be. So there really
so
wasn't anything that anybody could have done.
He had far more faith in you than I did, and I was rooting for you the entire time. But Alisher knew you were going to win
I
before you
just said
even
it. I
started
said
game
this was
one.
Matt's year.
I will say also this for the last game of heirlooms is, I mean, not only did I find the heirloom quick, but I think I won like 6 priority roll offs in a row.
You did, yeah.
And uh, I think, well, actually, no, I think there were like 6 key turns in there, and I think he won priority once, or he won the heroic move roll off once
Mhm.
in there, and it wasn't because my dice were loaded, because most of the time I think he was winning the He was winning priority and then losing the roll off. But like my entire army was within 6 inches of Aragorn, so it didn't matter. Um, and sometimes that happens. But yeah, it was. I was telling Evan about this that um, it was one of the things where I was winning those roll offs so consistently that I almost internalized it and was like, oh yeah, I could be in a lot of trouble if he moves first, but that's right. I'll end up moving first anyway. He'll be fine. And it
Yeah,
was,
it was
you
it,
know.
it was actually funny because I was the ringer for the round, so I was playing on bottom table. And one time I looked over and I just saw like this beam of light shining down directly onto you, and it was like, oh wow, this
Yeah.
guy
um,
truly is blessed.
well, look, I mean, you can't win, I think, a 5 game, 83-person tournament without a great deal of luck on your side. If for no other reason than, you can't, you can't make any mistakes. And there's, if you have an off game or the dice don't go your way in something, you're out. Just because, in a 6 game tournament, you can kind of you can have a bad matchup or something like that where like you get like a minor loss and still come back, or a draw and still come back. That is not true in a 5 game tournament. In a 5 game tournament, if you do anything less than a minor win, and really you can't have more than one of those, um, uh, then you're out of it. Which means that you really have to, you can't end up in any of the situations we're talking about where like, um, you know, you you've got the rock and you look across, you pick the scenario, you look across the table, and the other guy's got the paper.
Yeah.
Um, and I was fortunate enough by the skin of my teeth to, in the situations where I had disadvantageous army matchups, and I think I had 3 of those. I ended up getting like the right scenario in the circumstance to be able to find a way to wheedle my way out of that.
Yeah. And I will just say, like, from my end, because I was at the top tables for the last round, I mean, kudos to both you and Ted. I do, one of the things that I'm really like proud of American play is that I think we have like really good like sportsmanship amongst. Now there's a difference between gregariousness and like overt like like very like loud personalities and good sportsmanship. I mean, I thought Ted was, I've said this a lot about Ted, but I mean, Ted was an excellent sport given like the circumstances, certain things not going his way.
Yeah,
And I
no,
mean,
he certainly was.
and to your
We
point, like kind of being in the lead from the scenario, I mean, you were also an excellent sport about it too, which I really like about our events.
Yeah, no, I mean there were, I mean as thing after as die roll after die roll went wrong for Ted. I mean he always still had a smile on his face, and it was a fun game throughout. So hats off to Ted. He was a good opponent to have.
All right, so we've come down to the end of the list. Kind of just want to get closing thoughts from you and Trey, kind of about your overview, how you feel about Nova, maybe what you guys are interested in doing next in terms of what you're interested in playing about. I know, Matt, you had mentioned about, you talked about veto a lot, so interested to hear what you have to say there. So what do you guys think? So Trey, you're our guest, so why don't you start? What are your overall kind of hindsight view of Nova? What are you thinking about playing next? Give us a lowdown.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it was a great event. Devin should
First
have
time
made
you
six
went, right?
rounds. Yeah, it was my first Nova ever. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been playing for 2 years now, I believe. I think my first event was 2022 Lone Star Open, um, which is a fun event. That one, by fluke, I'd brought Iron Hills, got to top tables, and then Alex Orsak kicked my butt, which was quite the experience and super fun. And I had no idea what I was doing. Like I was like, oh, a Shield Wall of Dwarves is playing well. I'm winning. I must be good. And then after the event, I'm like, I'm a horrible player. But it's been a long time since then. That was my first out of state event too, which is also interesting. I've traveled around Texas to play events. I say it was really fun. Honestly, I was getting spooked about the terrain because I'd heard like, oh, they're super dense. But at least for the DFW group, we actually have a similar amount of terrain. I will say some of the more extravagant boards. We do not have boards anywhere near that. But at least the tables on like the top 10 tables, which is where I had all of my games except for one, which was on table 14, were pretty similar in like the terrain and the style to here, which was honestly kind of a relief because it just felt familiar to me. Um, I wish it was 6 rounds, just because I prefer having more games. But it was a great event. I like the veto a lot more. I think the strongest thing that the veto brings is it opens up for more army lists to be competitive. It isn't just, oh, the Shire, the army of the White Hand, uh, Assault on Lothlorien, or anything like that can just dominate. I think it brings a bit more balance to bringing more like what Matt brought, which is more like a death ball style army list. Um, I think it brings a bit more balance to just the whole game as a whole. It's kind of awkward with how the four works and then you do the roll off. I still think it works. But I do think in upper level competitive play tournaments, I think it's almost essential if you don't want just there to be a few lists that are like the strong meta that'll show up. I mean, that being said, we did have 13 men of the West show up at Nova, but you saw even of those, only two of them were in the top three. Now, to be fair, the final round there was three on the top three tables. Um, but I will say I do really like the way the veto worked. It gave me a bit more confidence because yes, I didn't bring a banner. Actually, I don't. I think I've run one army list all year that has had a banner. Uh, in the first 6 scenarios, I never brought a banner in any of my lists. It was fun. I got first place with the Rise of the Necromancer with 7 spiders or something at 600 points. Did the same with Wolves of Isengard, but that one I got second place, also undefeated. But all the lists they have tools to deal with banners. Um, I don't think banners are essential. I roll so badly, banners don't really help me anyways. Um, so it's just like whatever. Um, and everybody's like, "Oh, you need to take a banner," so I'm like, "Oh, really? Watch this." Um, but I felt like my list did exactly what it needed to do throughout the entire event. I think going forwards, the two lists I'm most excited to play are my Black Gate with a Fell Beast in it without the Witch King. That one's going to be fun, and then I'm also playing Battle of Greenfields. Both of those lists I'm looking forward to playing a lot. The Battle of the Greenfields, I'm running like 30 hobbits and then like 20 rangers. So it's more of just rangers with a few hobbits.
You'll have to let us know how that goes. That's it. So, do the Rangers get 2 attacks in that list?
Nope. I just gave them all spears so I can have fight four hobbits.
All right, fair enough.
You do get 30 bows with like 18 points of might though, so
Yep. All
it
right. Well, that'll
works.
be interesting.
I do play very kitey lists, so our one GT that I won, I brought Khazad-dûm, all Mirkwood or all Dwarven Rangers, and then I played my Wolves of Isengard with tons of bows and throwing spears, and then the Rise of the Necromancer with tons of bows and the throwing weapon spiders. So normally, traditionally, I do play heavy skirmish to kiting style lists. Um, Other than I've been playing a lot of Hero Hammer, like I used to bring Men of the West last edition with the twins and Aragorn. That used to be one of my favorite styles, but I do really like a kiting style, so I think I can maybe pull out something with the Battle of Greenfields. Not very high hopes on it though.
All right. Well, let us know how that goes. Yeah. So, as I said at the beginning, and I think said again at the middle, and I'll say it again at the end, I am now completely converted um, to the veto system in this edition for largely the reasons that Trey said, that it allows a much wider variety of armies to win tournaments, or at least count on winning tournaments, and because there are very few armies, and I think you could probably count them on the fingers of one hand, that can effectively have an effective answer for kind of like all of the scenarios in the game, or at least all but one of them. Um, and if you're going to try and win a tournament, you really need to take like one of those 5 or 6 armies. Um, but once you put the veto system in play, it kind of opens the door to a bunch of other types of um, a bunch of other types of armies, and also at least in my mind, creates kind of an interesting little game within a game of which scenario you're going to pick. Um, and because I know, what I was doing before I went into the next thing is I was looking over like which pools were still open, and I had my little list of, like this is the one I veto, this is the one I veto, this is the one I veto. And we're constantly adjusting those based on which army I thought I was going to end up fighting. And that's kind of an interesting little, kind of meta game that you get to play. But anyway, big fan of the veto system. I think everybody should be using it.
Fair enough. I don't know, Ivan, you and I have kind of been more passive in this episode. Do you have any thoughts? What are your takeaways now as a 2-year Nova judge?
Um, I think I think judging's fun, but I want to play next year. Is the main summary of that. Uh, but other than that, I think going back to the veto system, I agree with Dad. I think it really helped to balance out this Nova a lot. We saw what happened with Articon when you don't use the veto system, where you saw a
Articon
lot
Masters,
of, yeah,
Of
you saw
Army of
the
the White
same
Hand, Army of the
army
White Hand,
getting
Army of the
top
White Hand.
three.
Yep.
You saw a lot of similar builds. Um, and very few like breakout interesting lists. And Nova obviously flipped that trend on its head. It had some, interesting choices. It's very rare you'll see 13 of one army type at a You said how many Men of the West players you said were there, Alisher?
It was either 12
A
or
Trey
lot.
13.
said it.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, that's obviously very unusual. Um, but yeah, I think
Although, even amongst the Men of the West players, there was no unity in what the list
Yeah,
contained, right?
they were all different,
Which, I mean,
largely.
if you look at like the top three um, Army of the White Hand Masters competitors in at Articon, they all had essentially the same
S
list.
Yeah.
some of them took an additional chieftain.
Yeah.
And
All
Um,
right.
one of them had
that's
one
the end
less
Essentially,
of my
Purveying.
yeah.
that's the end of my sentence.
Essentially the same list. Whereas the men, I mean, there were three flavors of Men of the West running around that were very, very different and played very differently. There's my version, which we ripped off of Robin with the Gandalf, Aragorn, and I think I was the only one who had that. Then there was the Aragorn and birds, of which I think there were several, and then there was kind of the more traditional Aragorn, Legolas, Captain, um, of which there were several, and each of those lists plays differently. So I think it's I don't think you should come away with this thinking, oh, there were 13 men of the list there. Everybody's taking men of the list, and that's the way to go. There really weren't. There were
And the
13 men of the
West
West
lists.
divided into three categories of different things.
I like this army, men of the lists.
Men of the
But
Men of the West
anyways,
lists. Yeah.
uh, an army that I didn't see there, that I expected to see, and I think if it was there would have done extremely well was Usurpers of Edoras. Not a single person took that list, and I think 700, 700, 750, 800 are all good spots for it, because you can take Freckle Wolf, couple of chieftains, fill out your 58 models, and then just get as many Crebain as you can fit in. At 700, I think it's like seven or eight of them, which obviously isn't 14, but it's still a ridiculous amount. And just the ability to have 58 models with that massive Fight for bubble from Freka and Wolf, with his +1 to wound against heroes, and ability to sort of add that utility in there. I think
Yeah.
it would have done quite well. And because it's new, I was shocked that not a single person took it.
Yeah.
I
I
think
mean,
there's
it takes a
a
long time to paint up all those hillmen, by the way.
that, and then also I feel like it has the vibe of just being like the new person's army. So I feel like a lot of old veterans are like leaning away from it just because when you look at it, you go, oh, it's a beginner army. A lot like I've not seen a whole lot of veterans take like the Return of the King last edition, or the Balrog last edition, because it was like that's the new flashy thing for new players. That saying, I think it is quite good, especially because you get the amount of Kerbane while still getting a lot of Fight 4 from Freka. And then, like you said, Evan, the utility Wolf brings is just perfect for the list. It brings something that I sorely missed when I played the all-cap white hand was having a hard hitter. Because sure, the Kerbane and stuff did well, but the one game Michael and I did end up losing in doubles was against Double Dragons in the Clash of Titans or whatever, the Contest of Champions one. And that one is like we transfixed one of their dragons for like 8 straight turns, and then the other one got like 3 kills and won the game before we timed out. So it's like I do like the utility that the Usurpers brings in having a hitter, and I think having that many models with a hitter combined with all of the Kerbane could have done very well.
I think part of the problem is I think it just hasn't really made it to the US yet, um, because it's had an interesting evolutionary phase. Because in the beginning, everybody was taking, is it Thorn, the Rohan
Thorn,
trader
yeah.
guy?
Hmm.
And the philosophy behind that was that wild men with defense 3 aren't that great, so they wanted to take Rohan warriors, and they got an additional +1 fight value bubble from that, and they got the banner. The issue that people started figuring out that caused them to tweak lists is that Thorn is terrible. He's
Yeah.
like 70 points and provides basically no utility more than a 40-point Hill Tribes captain, except for the +1 fight value bubble, which Freka can compensate with anyways. Um,
And a
and the
banner.
Warriors of Row, yes, and the banner, which is 25 points, which is 4 to 5 hill tribesmen. And you start to see this stack up a lot because also the warriors of Rohan, if you give them throwing spears, are what, 9 points?
9 points each.
um, which is almost 2 hill tribesmen. So once you get to those levels and you're taking Thorn and a banner and all these warriors of Rohan, you start having to make the tricky decision of either having a really low model count, which for hill tribes just isn't an option, dropping Wolf, who I think we'll all agree also just isn't an option, because he adds so much to the army, or dropping a
Uh,
bunch of Kerbane, which you really don't want to do that. Um, and then people eventually, I think, sort of the what changed people's minds was at Nations Cup when the Polish player, I forget his name, ended up coming first in the uh, in the individual rankings with an army list of the uh, of the construction that doesn't take Thorn. Um, and then
yeah.
it won Articon as well. And I think we just haven't seen it make it to the US quite yet.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think you can, particularly at low points, use the traditional construction, and it's still an effective army. I think the one that the component that you just listed that can go away most successfully, at least like I said, at lower points, is Wolf. Because there's something to be said for just having a gazillion fight for figures um, all across the board. But um, yeah, that does seem to be the way the new build is going, is a bunch of Crebain, Wolf, and just a bunch of wild men.
As devil's advocate, though, you gotta respect Lord Thorin being fight for with no heroic strike and heroic challenge. Like the guys that can't be overlooked. That's the
Yeah.
way to go. Fight for
Yeah,
with heroic challenge, guys.
He,
his
it's
sole point is to bring a banner and a bunch of fight for spears
yeah.
at low
Which
points.
I think is super tempting with the original 6 scenarios. Like that was super popular
Yes.
here in the DFW.
Yep.
Everybody was getting the starter set because they wanted the new minis, and then they're like, "Well, I can use the Rohan guys that come in it as well as the Hill Tribesmen and just make a list." And whatever. I agree. Every time I've played a list that has the Lord Thorn in it, it's been an easy win. Like it's not that big of a deal because
I
it
mean,
does
if you're
hurt.
especially if you're fighting at like 350, 400, 450
Yeah.
points, um, that was a very tough army to beat.
Hmm. Hmm. All right. Well, I feel like we're getting a little too deep in a rabbit hole here. I would argue that going thornless at 350, 400 is a much better option, but How about we wrap up this episode, shall we,
Yep,
before we really get off the rails?
sounds good. Trey, thanks for joining us. It's been great,
Yeah,
and
thank
hope
you.
to see you again soon. And maybe if and when we get down to the Dallas area, we can connect and have some games.
Definitely.